the weekly wave. Oh, I can't spend the nose. The weekly wave. Oh, can you tell me who? The weekly wave. Did you see it? The weekly wave. I'm glad you stopped by. Take him to him, baby. Take him up again. It'll come to me at some point, but
I'm an Ableton guy, so I have no idea
really,
what Logic's got going on. Yeah.
I feel like with the amount of time that you've been working in music, that you wouldn't have made the jump to Ableton, that you'd be a Pro Tools guy.
Well, for recording in the studio, I'm in Pro Tools.
Fair enough.
That's just kind of became such a norm, right?
Yeah.
Especially if you went to school for it.
Well, and let's give him the formal intro. Kevin Frias, everybody, sound engineer extraordinaire, amazing sound engineer as well. So you went to NYU, or where'd you go for?
I actually went to Berklee College of Music.
Beautiful.
In Boston. Boston's a beautiful city.
Dude,
and just a cool place.
I've only been once just to get hammered with my buddies, and I got to ride that fancy train thing that they have down there. It's confusing.
It is a little bit.
Yeah, and the streets are poorly laid out, but the culture's beautiful. Yeah.
It's cool. This is like every college known to man is just like located in a very close proximity.
Yeah, I guess I forgot about that. Like, there's a university square there between like 3 or 4 Ivy Leagues, and then Berkeley on top of that. It's just those got to be some hard-nosed coffee shop conversations. It's just like professionals very feel getting heated about 20-year-old shit, you know?
Right. I remember being at a get-together, and we're all drinking beers and shit, and like there was some cute girl, and I remember saying something like, "Oh yeah, you play guitar, man, at Julian Lodge," and just like talking about guitar players, and she was kind of like, okay. I'm like, oh fuck, I'm such a music nerd. Like, oh god.
Well, so what did you go through school for?
So I studied jazz for like the longest, right?
Mm.
Started on flute in 6th grade. Actually got really good at flute.
Yeah.
And then guitar just looked cooler, so I just changed over to guitar, and then did a lot of blues and jazz. And my music teacher was just such a person who was just so invested. And he was Ron Carter, the bass player. He was Ron Carter's like tech, and still is, since he was in college. So, anyways, we would meet up before school. And this was fucking 6th, 7th grade, dude. We meet up before school and after school, doing like in the morning it was like symphony books, whatever, just like concert music. After school, he would have like a Latin jazz band. Eventually, when we got really good.
From middle schoolers?
Yeah, dude. From 8th grade, we were doing like Department of Education in New York City, just gigging.
Dude, that's incredibly heavy for what that role pays. If you're going to be an educator in a middle school, like, you're clearly going way above and beyond. But did he just see that in you from a young age, or was it a full class before school and after school?
Say again?
Was it a full class before school and after school, or was it kind of just you?
No, it was a full class. It was a lot of us. So it's like if you wanted to be in band, that was like the thing.
Mm.
You have to show up before school and then after school. And then, obviously people weasel out, and then the more serious, people would stay. And then it developed into, we all kind of graduated and went to high school. And we would come back on Saturdays, 9 to 12, teach the younger kids, and then would have lunch till 1, and then like 1 to 5, we're just like going through charts, like the Latin real book and the real book, and like just going through different ways of, playing standards and stuff like that. And we did that for years, dude. So I went to LaGuardia High School, Music and Art in Midtown Manhattan, studied music there, jazz band, and then went to Berklee. Same thing, just like guitar, guitar study. And
compared to other Berklee students, did you have a higher capacity for just the amount of hours of work in a day? Like, you're coming from a pretty intense program, it sounds like.
Right. Well, you'd be surprised, dude. There's so many cats that go to Berklee that are like, they practice like 12 hours a day kind of thing, Those kind of musicians, like someone like Kurt Rosenwinkel, who's just like is known for just all day, just playing stuff. He'd fucking at least what I hear is that he would detune his guitar because he would get so bored, and then try to figure it out, try to figure out where he's at, you know.
That's gross. That's
Yeah.
you know.
So you're surrounded by people like that, so it's like it can be incredibly either inspiring or overwhelming, you know. So
Yeah.
it's like
Well, I think there's also like there's a threshold in. I think anyone that gets to that point has obviously like the academic ability to it. But to reach the threshold of actually enjoying it enough or feeling called to enough to want to go through that, like you're talking about
Right.
weeding kids out in junior high. It's
right,
like,
right,
that doesn't stop until the end of your senior year. People still falling off the bus.
right.
So the people that you walk out of that class have to be not only like extremely inspiring, but they must be in places that you look around at now, right?
Right, right. And you know, just go-getters, you
Mm.
know. People that don't wait for the phone call, they're just like sending out emails or just like trying to go get it.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of people think that being an artist is like, oh yeah, I'll get famous and then I'll have all these things to do. It's like, well, yeah, you can graduate from Berkeley and still sit on your fucking couch afterwards and not do anything, you know. So
And how many people come out of a schooling like that and go the artist route versus going into the field, in service level positions?
well, I don't know how many. I know a lot of people just go to Berkeley, make a few connects, and then you'll see them. You know, they'll move to LA, and you'll see them at the Grammys
Mm-hmm.
or at halftime shows. There's definitely been people that I've seen there. But I mean, it's definitely a handful of us that go into like the grind. You know, go into actual fields or just like not music related.
Yeah.
But I mean, dude, Charlie Puth was in my class. Betty Who was in my class.
That's so cool.
This band called Ripe, the lead singer Robbie, he was in one of my classes. Like, you know, there's a lot of people that do very well.
Yeah, I just
Um,
wouldn't imagine that would be as much the artist route because it is so highly technical. I think you find
Right.
a lot of times that the artist is the person that tries to figure out their vibe and the personability behind, selling that vibe, for lack of a better word. It's not all sales, but you're trying to make this digestible to your audience versus someone that goes through that much of such in-depth musical education then becomes the enabler of those folks from point A to point B. Uh, and so I guess I just find it off-putting that you
Mhm.
have artists of, I guess not Charlie Puth. That makes total sense. That dude's clearly a nut. You know
Yeah,
what I mean?
right.
So when did you make the transition from your instrument to like the meaning of capture and live sound?
Right. So I remember it was super early on at Berkeley. Like we got a tour. I forget what it was, but for some reason we were getting a tour of the studios when I was already a student, like first semester student. I think like orientation week. There's a bunch of activities, and went through the studios and Berkeley, full analog consoles, beautiful studios. And at this point, they have a new building with like, all new stuff that I didn't even get to use. But
Is there an alumni pass?
I wish there were.
There's not.
That'd be sick. I'm sure there is, but like invite only. You know, the
Okay.
30 under 30 folks.
This is
thing.
the clip that I'm going to push. Is an angry personnel. Like, we need to get this man into the alumni
Yeah,
studios.
right. There you go. Berkeley, hit me up.
Free rates, baby. Well,
Yeah.
I can't imagine what it's like to have $1 million consoles afforded to you at a time in your life where it's hard to appreciate them the way you would at 40. Where
Right.
it's unavailable.
Right. So yeah, dude, I saw the studios and I was like, man, I want to learn how to use that thing. That's super cool. And there's part of it was kind of like there's so many guitar players at Berkeley. There's so many, and they're all super talented.
Mhm.
So I'm like, am I just going to be another guitar performance major at Berkeley, or can I just learn something else? I can play however much I want outside of class. I still have to take guitar classes throughout my Berkeley curriculum. I'm like, fuck it, I'm just going to get a degree in something technical. It was just kind of like an impulse thing.
Yeah,
I
so
fell in
what
love
year
with
is
it.
that?
That was 2010, fall of 2010, maybe spring of 2011.
Is that your freshman year?
Yeah, that's what I went in. Yeah,
Okay.
2010.
Gotcha.
Yeah, and
Man. So from there, and I'd imagine that gigging becomes pretty easy in that scene because they're always pulling from Berkeley students to do that kind of work, correct?
well, it definitely it depends. Depends where you're at. Some people I found when I graduated and got back to New York, I found that a lot of places, like for example, I worked at this, got this gig from a friend. Literally, like we're sitting at the Iridium Jazz Club during the day. My friend knows the manager. We're just having lunch, and she goes, my friend Kevin's an audio engineer. You should hire him. She's like, oh, actually, so upstairs from the Iridium Jazz Club is a diner called Ellen Stardust Diner. A bunch of actors work there because it's singing wait staff. And so during the holiday season, overflow is in the basement in the Iridium for the diner.
Mm.
So I became a sound guy for the diner. You know, I'm here with a Berkeley degree, and I'm at a diner just like they're singing show tunes and stuff. It's just like a wireless mic and a track, right?
And they're just running lapel mics on all these guys?
No, just wireless. They'll grab a wireless, you know, they'll do their thing and then go back to wait staffing.
Yeah.
But then, like, it must have been like 6 months later, they let go of, they didn't tell me this, but they were like, oh, we had a falling out with our sound engineer for the actual jazz club. Would you be interested? I'm like, yeah. And I'm like telling them, like, you know, went to Berkeley, all this stuff. And they're like, that's cool. I've got Victor Wooten next week. Can you, like, do it? I was like, oh, shit. Yeah, you don't care about my degree. Like, you just need me to run sound.
Yeah. Well,
Can you hang, you know?
Yeah, I think that degree means a lot of things to a lot of people.
Right.
To a lot of people outside of the music industry, it's like it's one of the few stamps they'll know, but it's just a stamp. Versus people that are in the community know that that's a different level of rigor to put yourself through and tremendous cost. Where it's like you look at a lot of fields these days that you get an education for, and does the cost of the education quantify your first couple of years in that industry? It's like there's less and less of those.
Right.
But what a crazy opportunity the first week to be in front of a guy that, you know, we all look at as one of the greatest music teachers of this generation.
Yeah, it was incredible, dude. Because I left Berkeley I had just turned 20. You know, I was kind of just like an overachiever, did a summer semester, kind of looked at the curriculum and condensed some stuff and took extra classes. So, dude, I was 20 in New York City. I had an internship before I graduated at a studio in Brooklyn recording jazz music. At least, well, at that point, interning, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so here I am, dude, 20 years old, and I'm like, oh, snap. Like, Mike Stern passed by. Stanley Jordan, which is, like, one of my all-time heroes. Yeah, so, like, Victor Wooten. And that night, my music teacher, his name is Sergio Larios, he calls me. He's like, hey, Victor's actually going to have Ron. Can I come in early and set up his rig? And I'm like, dude. So I had Victor Wooten, Ron Carter, Steve Bailey. I forget who the drummer was, but it was incredible, dude. But, like, yeah, I can keep naming people who went through there, but, like, that's a famous jazz club.
Yeah.
I just happened to get the gig and
how
be
long did you
there.
work that gig?
I only did it for, like, as the jazz club, I did it for, like, 4 months, because then it was just kind of like the happiness level went down.
Mm.
You know, I was working a lot for almost little pay. It's that kind of thing, you know, where it's like,
Yeah.
you know, but then again, you know, I'm 20 years old and getting to experience this, but I just had more ambitions than that, you know.
Well, I think there's something about that genre that, like, our generations watch jazz become academia, and then jazz has lost all grip on the popular sect. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Like, none of that music gets to pay out the way that should pay out. So as much as it's an honor and it's musically stimulating, it's like if they're paying you less than, you know, $200 a night, you're living in New York fucking City, which
Right.
so you grew up in NYC, though. You're used to that kind of cost of living and style of living.
Well, I was super lucky because my parents. So I was born in Queens. At some point, we moved to Dominican Republic because I think both my parents are Dominican. So we actually moved to Dominican Republic for I think like 4 or 5 years, and then my dad never made the move. He was a yellow cab driver in New York. So we just ended up going back in the year 2000. And so I've been lucky we had a rent-controlled apartment, and we still have it there. So I didn't really I didn't struggle that way. I didn't have to pay rent. I mean, honestly, like by the time my parents moved out, I was making good money just in general.
That's awesome.
So I had the opportunity to figure it out.
That's one of those things that, like, I can't imagine what it's like to have your parents in that kind of hustle, in an NYC, like the cab kind of thing. Where, how long do you work that gig?
Dude, since late 80s, I think.
Jesus.
Yeah.
So understandable why you want to go back to your home and finally, hopefully, be able to take some cash with you as well.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think at some point, being a yellow cab driver was like the move. It's like you can make a lot of money. Again, a lot of it's cash. But once Uber and Lyft and all that stuff got introduced, it's like that industry just kind of tanked. So
yeah, well, it's really odd the way that, like, I saw a thing recently, the Airbnb's kind of falling apart compared to the hotels because cleaning fees are going up, or there's just like there's quality issues that come with customer to individual rather than customer to business, where
Mhm.
there's that kind of liability. I
Right.
can't imagine the pitfalls of having Uber and whatnot in NYC, because it's not as safe as sometimes as a cab could be.
Right. Right.
So
Yeah.
you lived in the city up till
Let's see. So up till the pandemic, really, like pandemic hit, we 3 months earlier had just on a whim, like my in-laws were flipping a house, and they were always, uh, just kind of flirting at the idea, like, oh, you should move to Cincinnati, and we're like, oh, we're from New York. Like, I'm like, I don't know, I'm not moving to Cincinnati.
yeah.
So we found this house, super charming, like a lot of cool stuff to it. We're like, all right, this could be a project for 5 years, and we can renovate it, in that time, and then eventually move.
Mm.
3 months later, pandemic hits. Manhattan, we heard something like we both got like furloughed, if you will. Manhattan said something about maybe closing down the island, so we panicked, packed the little 2002 Corolla we were driving to the brim, and just overnight drove to Cincinnati.
That's so crazy.
Yeah. So we renovated the house for a couple months. Pretty much lived there until we got our jobs back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you had just had your first then, right?
So we were not pregnant then. We were
Okay.
still,
What a
just regular parents. Regular
good
people.
situation to not be dealing with then. It's like,
Right.
I can't imagine, first time parents going through a mass exodus like that.
Right.
As you left the city that day, did it feel like it was going to be your full step away? Was it
No, dude. It didn't. We were like, cool, we'll just go there for 2 weeks, see what we can get done, and come back. It's like, let's blow over.
Man, that's brutal. I can't imagine saying goodbye to your home in that kind of a way.
It was weird. It was definitely weird. I mean, but the comforting thing was that everyone was going through it together, at
Mhm.
least. But it was definitely. I remembered like doing like FaceTimes with my friends from college. They're all like spread across the country. We're like, what are you doing with your time off? Like,
Yeah.
that kind of stuff. So I mean, in a weird way, it was like, wow, we never get this moment. To just like, I don't have to worry about going to work. I don't have to worry about this. Unemployment was like rolling out. I'm like, it was such a unique time.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like someone my age. I'm turning 30 this week. It's like I've never experienced something that grand. Like something didn't have that much effect, other than like
Yeah.
9/11 and the 2008 crash. But still, like,
But I think even those things, it doesn't change your day-to-day life the way that did.
right. Exactly.
Those were like odd moments of times, or a major crack down the seam of something we thought was unmovable, but it's like all of our lives became stoppable in that moment, except for a couple
Right.
people.
Right.
Like during that time for me, like I was just down here, live with my folks, trying to learn how to record myself and do that kind of thing, while my fiance was in her first couple nursing jobs, experiencing
gotcha.
ER.
Wow.
When the pandemic started, she was doing a travel agency gig out in LA. So she's away from all of her friends and family, living in this like one person little like it was like an above garage suite almost. Like it wasn't a big place.
Gotcha.
And just going through the hell of watching a hospital system crumble underneath that. It's like,
right.
for some of us, it was a breath of fresh air, and it was a really like it was an opportunity to pivot happily.
Right.
And then some people just got shat on by the
Well,
world, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
it's such an odd thing to look back on, the way that we've all kind of built away from that. Like, she got to go maskless for the first time at work. It's like, if you're still in a surgery room, you got to put the mask on. But like
Right.
your normal day-to-day with patients, she hadn't seen a person's face at work for 3 years. Well, we're back
Right.
to casual. Like,
Jeez.
I'm sharing
Right.
drinks with Johnny Disco on most of these gigs.
Right,
Like, drink from the
right.
bottle, don't matter.
Right.
Yeah, it's a real trip, man. So,
Yeah.
So during that whole time, are you learning how to renovate a house for the first time?
Dude, pretty much.
That's pretty cool too.
And in fact, well, this was a little after, but yeah, my father-in-law had was a big help in all of it.
Yeah. He was
kinda-
in the game of flipping before.
Oh yeah, he's been in it for decades,
Oh,
So he was
yeah.
just like, okay, cool, this is what we're gonna do. There was nothing in there because he had like gutted it, if you will. It's an older ranch home made out of brick and mortar, so it wasn't like to the studs
Yeah.
kind of gut, but it was like there was no bathroom, there was no kitchen. So it was from scratch, dude. We stayed with them for a month while we kind of just like got the bedroom and the bathroom going.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was super fun. My mom's always been handy, so it was kind of like I embraced it, dude. I was
Yeah.
like, I'm into it.
While your parents went through the pandemic in the Dominican, right?
Let me think. I think, yeah, they were both in the Dominican Republic at that
Cool.
time. Yeah.
So when was the first time they got to see this house? Like totally finished, like all done?
So yeah, I mean, I sent pictures, like,
Yeah.
because only a few months after we were there, it was pretty much like, you know,
Mm.
kitchen was in, bathroom, laundry room. So they were psyched. They've always dreamed of having a house,
Yeah.
in
Well,
the States at least. So.
It's kind of funny the way, like, if you see a friend for the first time in 5 years or 10 years, like, someone can make a visual jump like that, even if you've seen some pictures leading up to them, versus you see your own day to day or the build of a house. And it's a slow, gradual, painful process.
Right.
And it's like our baby goes from being a New York boy to being a dude with a house in Cincinnati, Ohio,
Right.
which must seem random as fuck to them at that
I'm
point.
I'm sure I've always been like, like even moving to Boston for them, we're like, what the fuck? Like he's going away for college? It's
Yeah.
been so weird. So I think they were just kind of like he would move to Cincinnati, kind of thing.
Fair enough.
But yeah, I just got chickens. So my mom's like, oh my God, you got chickens? Like you're a real country boy now, like.
Have you enjoyed that process?
Oh, dude, I love having it now. Yeah, the past couple weeks have been hard, just because we're building we built this massive chicken coop for them.
Oh,
And,
shit.
my wife and I are very particular, and we had a vision, and we're using like 100-year-old siding, barn siding, reclaimed, and
Dude, that's so
so it's been a
random.
process, but it's done now, and we're super happy, and they're super fun.
But you've been deep in the weeds then, man. You built that whole fence a couple weeks ago. Like, we had to reschedule
Right.
this because you're digging 4 feet under 30
Yeah.
times,
Right. Well, luckily it was only like 9 posts.
Okay.
But I did cancel because I was like, dude, and then this is what you go through when you have a kid and have a pregnant wife, is that I'm like, all right, cool. We had this scheduled thing on a Wednesday. Thursday, my father-in-law, that was his only day for a couple hours to help me put the panels up.
Mhm.
At this point, it's Tuesday evening. The old panels are still up. So I still need to take the posts out, take the panels out, dig new holes, and, prep all the stuff. So I was like, I just need to cancel this and do it.
Well, I can't imagine the day of grunt force that you went through for that. But there's got to be such a different experience of living in a home that because you built it, you know how to fix it. There's a different assurance in the fact that this is gone. Your life literally is gone from no bathroom, no bedroom to a family of 4 and how we occupy this space in our own classy way. Like that takes some grunt, man, Some
Yeah.
grit.
Definitely. And there's that thing that everyone knows. It's like, oh shit, I did fuck up that little corner there. I still haven't fixed, or like I still haven't caulked this little corner here, or just like my father-in-law would always say, it's like just give it 30 days and you'll forget about it,
Is that kind of how you feel when you approach a mix the same way? Is it just step away from it, acknowledge that, or like I feel like it's a great lesson for people because we all have a bad tendency to pick at scabs, to try to get things in this disoriented realm of perfect. It's like, how close do you get to that line without driving yourself crazy?
Right, right. Well, it gets to the point where it's like it starts getting worse, right? Whatever you do, you start nitpicking, and it's like, a couple versions later, you're like, let me just listen to what it was before I started getting self-conscious. And you're like, damn, there's something about that I like more. So at some point, yeah, you just need to step away and let the bird fly, kind of thing.
So when was the first time that you had a project that you had done all the tracking or the mix and master on, or like what's the first step into your new artistic side of your career? Because you're talking about an artist that you work with most right now.
Yeah, it was a artist named Violet, and she kind of approached us just kind of through the grapevine. She asked her neighbor, Bob Clearmountain, who's a kind of famous mixer, for just some kind of production people in New York, and he called someone who worked for him a while ago, this guy that I worked for named Joey Rea, who's also a mixer for, he does a bunch of Disney stuff, he does Run the Jewels, he does Aesop Rock, and he called me and my buddy Lewis, because we were just kind of like a production duo, and he was like, are you interested? So we kind of just had a meeting with her, just kind of gauge what she wants to accomplish and to see if we can help accomplish that goal. And yeah, dude, we did one song for her. We met up in person. With her, it was really ideal because she is incredibly she has a vision essentially, right? So she lays out almost like a mood board for us. Says, this is what I'm going for. These are all the songs that I like, or I think it can sound like. This is what I like from each song. And she kind of gives us the freedom to like just do with that what you will. And between Lewis and I, we create 4 or 5 demos, just kind of with all those things in mind. And from there, we kind of just like, all right, we like these 3.
Yeah.
What do we like about these 3? And then try to make one track out of, all of those.
And where do you start in that process? Are you writing the lyrics, writing the music, the full composition? Right.
So
That's awesome.
with her, she will have the lyrics, and then after that, it's just us. So I kind of tried the way I approach. I don't know about Lewis, my production partner. I usually try to just like, I need a quiet room, I need the time, and I just kind of focus in on her feeling and trying to put myself in that realm, and just start. I lay down a couple instruments that I like. I usually use Omnisphere. It has a lot of texture stuff. Even if I don't use it at the end, it helps me hear things. And then for me, I'm more of like it comes to me kind of thing, play it by ear kind of guy. So I'll start playing stuff, and I'm like, oh shit, yeah, I hear this, I hear these notes, oh cool, and then that will lead to something else. And sometimes I'll be like, nah, not good enough, and I'll start something new. But I kind of go through it like that, and then I'll show it to Lewis. And then he'll hear some stuff and send stuff back, and that'll re-inspire me. And then, by the time we're done with it, it's like we've thrown the ball back and forth, and now it's this thing.
Well, I imagine there's a good amount of freedom when you get to try to put yourself in the artist's shoes rather than having to be the artist. Because there's so many times where you're in the act of creating, and instead of just moving on to the next one, you feel that conundrum of, I missed this, or I missed that, or I couldn't get that feeling to really enter into this,
Mm-hmm.
So was that the first time that you kind of ghostwritten for an artist in that way, or is that a business that you've been in for a while?
So I guess seriously for an artist, I did one project for a friend, in Ashley, years ago, and it was kind of a similar thing. Like, she had lyrics, she had chords, but I was just so inexperienced, and I was so new at producing. It just kind of was what it was, When we made an EP, and I listened back, and I'm like, oh yeah, that was cute. That was like my younger self.
Yeah.
But this one, I feel like it was the most. I know my process. I know what I like. I've done it for a couple years now for myself, and just in general. I felt so like prepared for the job, kind of thing.
That's awesome.
So it was fun, definitely, and we still work on stuff with her. So it's.
And when you say there's a body of work for yourself, are you still actively writing under your own artist umbrella, or is that kind of reserved to pitched artists?
Well, so anything that we create, Lewis and I go as the name Betty Could. And so if you look that up, we have put out some songs, and it's kind of like, I don't know how to explain it, but it's electronic based. It's a little nerdy because you can hear some jazz influence in there.
Cool.
But we usually, anything we create for ourselves, honestly, for my mental health, I create stuff. We just send stuff back and forth, and whatever sticks, we're like, all right, cool, yeah.
That's awesome. And when did you and Lewis meet? Like, when did this...
So he was part of that middle school band that I was talking about.
That's sick.
Yeah, I think Lewis is only like 2 years younger than me. So I might have been in the 8th grade when he was in 6th grade, and then we kind of we weren't like super best friends immediately kind of thing, but we were just in the band, and he's a killer saxophone player. He ended up going to Berkeley too. He and I had the same education, same middle school, same high school, and also went to Berkeley. But he ended up playing baritone and got a presidential scholarship to Berkeley. So he kind of one-upped me there, but.
Dude, you might have chose the right trajectory for that kind of opportunity.
I know.
But still, how weird to have someone. Do you feel like in some ways that that you were meant to follow that same trajectory, that you two had seen eye to eye in a lot of ways, and that was kind of bound to happen? Or did you somewhat pave that way, and he saw that you were doing well in that direction?
I don't know. That's a good question.
Yeah. Well,
I should ask him that and see.
Next time you come back on, I would love for you to bring him, because I think songwriting relationships are one of the most particular.
Mm-hmm.
And being able to write for yourselves and then write with artists takes so much of that willingness to throw the ball across and catch what you catch.
Mm-hmm.
No preciousness about it. And we
Right.
all have a level of preciousness with our artistry that's
Yes.
hard to overcome.
Right. Yeah.
When did you really start to work on that craft of letting the song find what's best for the song?
Right. I feel like I don't know when it happened, but at some point I started. I think it's when Lewis and I really started like we should produce together. We should just work together, just in general as collaborators. Um, there you go through emotions, right? So it's like, here's I created this thing. Here's my darling, and then Lewis would be like, "Nah, dude, you should mute this. You should mute this, and then take this out." And then he'll send something back, and I'm like, "But wait, it's not that thing anymore." So it's like at some point I was like, oh, "Okay," and I learned. And also this applies to just like being a partner, having a wife too. It's like you learn to just be like, okay, cool. Let me see what this is about before I say no. It should be my way, or we should keep what my idea was. Let's see where this goes. And sometimes, 9 times out of 10 with Lewis, it's like we'll let it go, and then at some point we're out there like be like, yeah, this is really cool. We both are proud of this, or like we both are like, I'm not sure. So at some point through that collaboration, and I think through my growing relationship with my wife, I learned to just kill my darlings. Sometimes you have to allow that to happen,
Yeah,
right? Like,
what a brilliant point, though, where there's some relationships that are uncompromising, and there's some relationships that are all compromise. And when you learn that compromise, sometimes you get a little more lenient on this other side. It's like our expectations cloud a lot of what we can artistically give at any point in time. And if your expectation is the stem pack that you sent over the session, and then it comes back and your precious is muted, it's like, can you really hear? Can you hear that being totally blind again to what was there before?
right. That's a big challenge, and
Yeah,
I
mean,
I think we all deal with that, right?
I have a hard time being in the category of a solo artist that has a band, but you got to draw lines with people about I'm going to have 3 bass players come in here and lay it down because I need to find variety in this.
Mm-hmm.
And if I could do it myself, I would do it myself. And like I'm interested in hearing as a guitar player, you kind of motioned as like you're doing most of this on a MIDI keyboard through
Yeah.
Omnisphere. So do you ever start to re-implement like analog sounds that you're comfortable with, or do you tend to push through that medium?
Gotcha. So I have found that I'm a very technical creator, right? I've become a very technical creator, and my wife has let me know that. But through also like collaborating with Lewis, like his stuff always comes back, or like his pitches for stuff. I always tell my wife, I'm like, man, it's so musical, and I'm more of like a technical producer where I'm good at like I go in, I can chop and screw and do a bunch of effects, and it sounds really cool. But like my wife's be like, this is so much like boop bop beep bop, It's like I wanna feel the song. So anytime I go back on guitar and just play stuff, I feel like I achieved that musicality that I'm looking for. So I think anytime I get on a MIDI keyboard, even though I do a lot on that, I'm less musical somehow than on my what I'm comfortable with, with the just organic
Yeah.
kind of.
And is the technical side of the art more subtractive?
I think sometimes it can be,
Yeah.
because it's super easy just to loop something. I'm like, would I have looped this that many times if I were just like playing the chords myself? It's easy to copy and paste.
Yeah, that's
like,
a crazy question to ask yourself, man. I
Right,
think the
right.
answer is almost always no.
right.
But would it be better if you could get someone just to play that part just the way you want to? I think about all like the greatest beat selection of like classic drum samples. Like it is one 4-bar loop the whole time, and am I ever sick of it? No, because it's
Right.
so great by itself. But sometimes if you ask someone to play that, there's no way that they would.
Right.
The heart just yearns for something different when you're actively in that role.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think there's a time and place, right? So it's like if you're thinking like '90s hip hop, or just even not just hip hop alone, but like if you're just if it's like a freestyle, you almost want like a really cool 4 to 8 bar loop, and just like let the rap or the poetry kind of come out and shine that way.
Yeah.
But if it's someone's like if we're thinking someone like Kendrick Lamar, there's a huge like storyline, and then the music moves with that. Or like even Run the Jewels, if you listen to their stuff is like technically looped. But if you start listening, dude, like almost I think every 8 bars he's introducing a new string synth or a new sound or a new thing. So like from start to finish, there's a growth and a change in mood, and A$AP Rock does the same thing.
Yeah.
So I think there's a time and place for that. This depends what you want to accomplish. I think some music, it's like it can be subtractive to loop and not have that person there.
Well, I'm not even saying that it's subtractive to have the loop. I'm just saying like when it comes to the creative act through the technicality, it's almost trying to get things out of each other's way. I had the guy that produced my last EP gave me great advice of find out what you like most about a song, then try to hold everything else accountable to that thing, so that it feels like we can ride the sense of direction with this, and that dynamic will drive what's going on in the rest. And then I've tried to get into something as simple as automating certain effects in and out of songs. Like I'm a very amateur producer, but the way that provides musically to your experience is such a mindfuck. It's blown my mind across the wall, man.
Yeah.
When you're doing something like that, do you like to manually write with a fader, or do you write in automation points and whatnot?
I write in with technically the fader.
Okay.
I guess at this point it's a mouse.
And I think, whatever floats your boat. People like having it hands-on. Some people like the touch screen. I think just watching someone who is the God, what do you even call the guy in front of the orchestra with his baton?
Conductor.
Yeah, you are the conductor in that point. This guy's doing it with 10 points of what and why, and that's such a beautiful thing to be great at. That if you're sitting there and you're just writing points and doing the math, it's like, I don't know if that's ever going to be as sexy as a guy being like, oh, here we go, let's bring it back.
Right. I mean, dude, you see some mixers, and they're at the fader, and even if it's like, two really rocking guitars, sometimes they're going like this. And it's not necessary for a level change or for like a up and down effect, but it's like, music is actual waveforms coming at you. So it's like, it makes it feel alive if all the faders are kind of like literally alive, and kind of moving.
I've never thought about that. And the visual you just gave me is a jellyfish.
Yeah, right, exactly.
And, like the sensation of pulse and breath within the music in that kind of a way is so much like the perceptional fun. Like, yeah, at some point it's going to be squeezed onto one phone speaker, but if you get someone in the right place in their car, which I think is all of our favorite place, like,
right.
And you go from the passenger seat to the driver, and they get to feel that swell. It's pretty swell. It's nice.
Yeah, it is nice. And it's, dude, I always tell people it's the difference between that moment when the song comes on, like if you're listening to a playlist, it's that moment of like, nah, next.
Yeah.
Dude, you had 3 seconds, so it's like.
It's a very scary thing, but do you think the access to music has enabled better music?
Can you rephrase?
Do you think the access to streaming music, to having music available to you whenever you want to have it, has made for better quality, just overall music in the world?
I don't know.
Because I think everyone could agree that there's shit at the top that you're never going to like, and that's fine. But if the access has rendered better results and we're just not looking in the right places, it's the consumer's fault for not praising the things that are magic. Like there's jazz today that would make Miles blush, you know what I mean? Like things that's really special. But it just gets paid no mind because of the flood that goes onto there.
Yeah, I think it's like a paradox of choice. There's so much out there. It can be hard to find.
Yeah.
It's a little bit like a needle in the haystack kind of thing. You got to do some digging to find something you like, I think. Especially with Spotify. It's like, people are like, oh, you haven't heard of this band? I'm like, yeah, dude, but there's thousands of options to choose from, like.
Yeah. And I think that somewhat subtracts from the shared experience we get with music. Like I was talking to a buddy the other day, like if you're bumping something in your car on the radio and someone pulls up, they're listening to the same thing, like you're kind of hyped about that shit. Like, that's a funny moment in time. Or the same thing with being at a concert. And it's like the only thing you need to capture is the way that you and they felt in that room. You know,
Right.
what's the best concert you've ever gone to?
You know, that's a hard one.
It's a ridiculous question for someone that's seen as many shows.
I
I'm sure
know.
you've had.
I'll have to think about that.
Yeah, I think there's different things that they're your favorite for. It's like
Right.
I'm sure your favorite mix and the best attitude are totally different, sides of the show.
Right. Yeah, I got to think about that one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when you're in this world of live mixing and studio production, is the live mixing thing just to pay bills, or do you love that side of it still?
I think there are moments for sure, just like any gig. There are moments where it's like, this is why I do this, especially when it's a band that are, first of all, super nice, very easy to work with, has it together, right? And then their music inspires you on top of that. It's kind of hard because I'm also a musician and I'm at least have that mindset. It's like, if the music is really speaking to me, I almost feel even like the feeling is grander that way, So I'm like, oh yeah, I'm doing. This is why I do this. This is why I love to do this. And sometimes it's just a gig,
Yeah.
Um,
And it's allowed to be. It's allowed to be a day job,
Yeah.
Because the work's there,
Right.
It's interesting that you put kindness at the front of that list, though, because I think that's a great testament to how you do your job, man. You build trust with people very quickly when you walk on a bandstand. That's something I think everyone that's worked with you and since you would say. And it also sets you apart from a lot of other engineers in that way, because it seems to be a bit of a bitter world for a lot of guys, Like, they ended up being the people that are wrapping cables at the end of the night, carrying the heaviest shit, and they're also responsible for everything about the way the audience experiences that show. Like,
Yeah.
you don't realize the master hand at work
Right.
until it's not fucking working, and they can't hear
Right.
your vocal or something's messed up.
Yeah, it's tough. It can definitely be. I can see there are moments where I'm like, oh shoot, I'm the grumpy sound guy right now. But little do people know, like, I showed up one day at a gig and I was told it was going to be like 2 or 3 bands. There were 9 bands, no stage plots. So dude, I'm pissed.
Yeah.
And not pissed like at people in particular, but I'm just stressed out.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh snap, I gotta get, and I'm a person who wants to do a good job too, regardless, because I'm like, dude, 9 bands showed up. They want to have a good time. They all want to be treated like a band, you know what I'm saying? Like, so it's like throw and go, but also show that you care. But also I'm a little grumpy because, oh my God, I didn't know there was 9 bands coming in today.
Yeah.
So I can see where there's a lot of, I guess, little moments that create a grumpy sound person.
Yeah, well, I think for people looking from the outside in and what that position does, it doesn't seem like the key component. It just seems like you need a guy to run sound. It's like that's just so far from what that position requires. And you look at some of these cats that have worked a certain room for 40 years, and they've been put through that exact ringer over and over and over again. And they'll make that room shine, but they still may not seem happy.
Right.
It's traumatic when people come up and they're screaming at you because there's feedback during their set, or this cable didn't work, and you're a one-man show trying to put that thing together.
Right. Yeah, it feels a little bit like a circus sometimes, right? Especially, you just lose confidence if a piece of gear is going out.
Yeah.
If you're like, especially if it's something that people will notice, like the lead vocal. Like, oh, lead vocal's cutting out.
Yeah. And
then at that point, it's like, did I have the time to set up a backup vocal just nearby, or a backup cable or something? And if it can spiral really easily. Like, no, I didn't have time because I only get paid this much, and I came in at this time, and the band was good. It's like there's so many things.
Yeah. How do you kind of talk yourself off that ledge when things are going that direction?
Dude, I always think about, I'm not saving lives, or it can be a lot worse.
Yeah.
Or I always say, like, I always compare like the shitty gigs that I've had before and say, like, I'm not there anymore. I'm at this gig now.
Yeah.
And it's better here.
Yeah.
Trust me. So I'll just be like, all right, cool. What do we do? Like, vocals going out. My job is leave the console, go over there, and do something. Change the cable, change the channel. Like, try to like eliminate any possibility. There's no troubleshooting time, so I can't look at like, is it the cable, is it the mic, is it the tie line? I'm like, new everything.
Yeah.
New mic, new cable, new tie line. you know, because you don't have the time, you know.
Yeah, exactly. Like I need a thorough home run right now.
Right,
This needs to
exactly.
happen.
Yeah.
Man, how much does it change live sound to bring your setup, your particular way of doing things most of the time, to working a room that you're comfortable in?
Well, each room. So when it's kind of like the Blue Water Kings thing, where I
Yeah.
bring my own thing, each room is different. It can be a little nerve-wracking, especially if I don't have the time to, or if I, for whatever reason, showed up a little late, or there was a curveball and I didn't have time to tune,
Yeah.
or listen to the room at all because, for whatever reason. So new rooms are not bad. If I have the time, I go in early, I can tune, I can listen.
And how would you tune a room when you first go in?
So I kind of just do it by ear. Front of house guys that are doing actual concerts, they will set up a microphone that's meant for metering or analyzing frequencies, and they will run it into what we call a smart system. It's SMAART, and that'll kind of show you what your waveform should look like. And then the microphone will show you what the room is doing, like if the walls are, accentuating a frequency or whatever. So it shows you two line, the reference of what it should look like, and then what the room looks like, and then you kind of adjust your EQ that way.
And should the reference always be flat? I find that kind of confusing.
It's not flat because it's like if you think about our hearing, from 20 hertz from very low to very high, 20 kilohertz, it's not all at the same level. Like the really low lows are super low, so our hearing is kind of molded so that like it starts kind of going up, and somewhere in the middle it's really sensitive, and then kind of starts going down there. And it's this weird thing of like we need to be able to hear our babies cry, so it's like it's more sensitive at that baby range.
Yeah.
And that's why new parents go crazy and they can't help themselves when babies are crying. So
That's fucking crazy.
yeah, they're called Fletcher-Munson curves if you
Okay.
want to look up what it actually looks like.
Yeah.
But our ears are not flat all the way through. So yeah, that's the proper way to tune a room if you're tuning a room by ear. What I do is that I'll just play a song that I like that I know has like a bump and low end, has like really nice highs, which is Think Before I Speak by Astrid S. Astrid space S. I don't know if Astrid South or what, but
Okay. I'm unfamiliar, but that sounds rad.
yeah, I like it's funny. I like that song. But it's like a pop mix,
Okay.
which I really like. And then I start just going through a graphic EQ on my main left right bus, and I just start boosting stuff, and then I'll hear the room like I'm like oh yeah, that's like usually like 100 to 150 hertz is like likes to resonate, so I'll just like dip that down a little bit and kind of go through, and if it sounds more like the room is resonating in a certain frequency, I'll dip it. If it sounds like I'm just boosting 600 hertz, then I'll leave it alone.
And as you start to pull, are you relatively heavy-handed with those annoying frequencies, or you try to play?
I tend to be a little gentle because I don't want to do too much when it's not necessary. So I start gentle, and then once the band is playing, usually like 1.6 kilohertz is a very annoying feedback frequency. If I hear that, and I usually use it more, I'll speak to it. But to start, I just kind of be gentle, see what the band sounds like.
Yeah. Well, the blaster bus is something that I never really considered until I had on like an X32 to look at that kind of thing,
Right.
and realizing that you can give an overall treatment that should be a little bit lighter. So once you have feedback, do you address vocal mics, or do you go back to your master EQ?
I usually, if it's something really annoying like 1.6K, I'll go to the master bus. It just depends on what I have time for at that split second. Sometimes I'll do it on the vocal, but I tend to want to leave the vocal alone, even though it's still affected at the master bus. It depends. It changes every time, right? In the moment. Because right now I want to say I'll do it at the master bus, but sometimes it's like I know it's this lead vocal.
Yes.
So sometimes I'll do it to the lead vocal if I know for a fact it's like someone's very close to a speaker or something like that.
Yeah.
This way my snare drum is not lacking that snap at 1.6K kind of thing.
For sure. Well, it's so interesting to hear. Like, I think when you have a good engineer, they're extremely rational with why they do things. But that's all. They're so rational. That's why it changes sometimes. The process doesn't need to be one straightforward approach. It's an art in and of itself. So like having some fun with the what and why is most of the sexiness of why one guy sounds great and the other guy's just like, this is fucked up.
Yeah.
So once you've tuned the room, then you start throwing out your snakes and all that and just getting comfy, or
Yeah, I kind of do. I like to run. Let's see, what do I do first? I run power. I put all my monitors out. I run power. Then I set up all my speakers. Then once everything's powered and and all of the objects are in place, I'll start running cables, XLR cables.
and then you always have like a written list for your inputs, right? Like you're like
At this point, especially for Blue Water Kings, I've just gotten good at like doing it by ear, or just in my
Memorizing it.
brain
Yeah.
kind of thing. I'm like, okay, cool. If I know it's one of your gigs, I'm like, okay, cool. I know Matt's got something on his console. I know you've got a setup, so I'm like, I don't even worry about it. I just get there.
Yeah.
We'll figure it out.
Well, sometimes that system makes me feel like such a pain, especially in the world of original venues where it's like, say I'm an opening act and whatnot. Sometimes people would tell me, like, we don't have time for a setup like that, which I always wonder, like, what is optimal for an engineer if someone's to come in and run ears and they're just going to drop you off a case and it should be done at that point?
Dude, honestly, at first, I was like, man, that's such a pain in the ass. If someone comes in with an in-ear rig and all that stuff, and like, oh, I have a splitter. But then I started thinking like, well, then I actually started playing, and I had my own in-ear rig, and I had a splitter, and I was just like, here are my lines. And then I started thinking like, man, what's the reality? I'm still running XLR cables. Whether I have to unplug it from a wedge and give it to you, it's not much different, I think it can be an insecurity thing. Maybe I don't want to deal with a changeover from the first band to the second band. It could be that. It could be an ego. But dude, I've become a person who's just like, that's what you have? Great, let's make it work.
Yeah.
And especially if it's a rack like yours, it's like, it's easy peasy, dude. It's like XLR is here, done.
Mm-hmm. Well, and that being said, it's fallen apart many times in the last 5 years I've used it. But you always want to be considerate of your engineer, because again, like, this person is going to have everything to do with why you sound great or why you sound like shit tonight. And if you're trying to bring something for your own comfort, it should be for their comfort too. Like, there's plenty of times where I'm like, I'm not even going to mention that I brought this rack in because they seem pissed right now.
Right.
But you always want to find out also, like, what can you do to be the most advantageous to, you're only playing a 40-minute set, you're not getting paid a lot of money, you should track the set and come out here and try to make something of that.
Right.
But it's a tough game, man. Like,
Yeah, it depends who you get, dude.
yeah,
Unfortunately, it depends who you get.
absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, there I feel like there are things that, like, don't ask me for a 1/4-inch cable, because I'm like, dude, if you're a guitar player, bass player, you should have multiple 1/4-inch cables. I mean, why don't people can see fine also? That's your gig. I have other things to do right now. So when it's like, I need to get you sound check, but you're dealing with like, do you have a cable? And I'm like, but this dude just asked for an extra DI box that's not on their stage block. I guess that the one thing, have your cables, have batteries, especially if you're running wireless, have your own double A's. The main thing, and this might not even be the band's fault, is having a stage plot that's accurate. One that's accurate and one that just gets to the engineering period. I've sent, as an artist, sent stage plots to people, and they're like, yeah, we'll get it to blah, 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 the sound person. And then in person, I'm like, hey, did you get my stage plot? And they're like, I didn't get anything. And so now they're overwhelmed by, like, here, I have a splitter, and this is my in-ear rig, Like.
So when you send out a stage plot, what's the crucial layout? How you like to see that go?
When I receive or I send?
I think both. Like, being a sound engineer, how would you lay it out to be most simple and efficient?
For me, so as an engineer, when I receive a stage plot, I like to see where everyone's standing and what instruments they're playing. Sometimes it'll just be a list of inputs and like someone's name, and I'm like, yeah, but I don't know your band. I don't know where they're at. So now I'm like at the gig, I have no idea what's going on, kind of thing. So ideally, yeah, just whatever all your inputs are that you actually are using. It's helpful to. I know like some bands are touring and don't have time to like change every input depending on the changes if they're an opening band and doing something simpler. But it's nice to have something accurate, because then sometimes it's a lot, and I'll set up 32 lines, and they're like, oh yeah, but we're only using 16 tonight. Okay, now I'm wasting 25 minutes more to undo what I did, So
Yeah.
accurate stage plot. I don't usually, I'm not super picky as to like in what order the instruments are or if they have numbers on it, because I 9 times out of 10 will organize it the way I like it organized, you know.
Mhm.
But yeah, just I'd like to know where people are standing and what the actual inputs are, you know. So
I think that's great advice. I've wasted so much time making stage plots that had unnecessary information, the wrong information, poorly labeled information. It's just like you really need to give this person the comfort and confidence to know that they were informed before the show started moving. Because
yeah,
once cables hit the floor, like shit just got way more serious, and we got to go together on this journey.
right,
You
and
know?
it's almost like a festival. It's like the first time I worked the festival, I think was honestly last year. Um, it's go and go.
Yeah, I can imagine. Like 2 music festivals, 3 days of
Yeah, it's like, you know, if you think about it, you're doing maybe 8 bands, you go back to back, and you're just like, okay. And honestly, it's actually it's a little simple in a way. It's like, okay, cool. Here are my drum channels. You have to lay it out like that. Especially, you need to have a console that can handle a lot of channels.
Yeah.
At least 32. Because then you can be like, okay, 1 through 10 is going to be purely drums. Because then between bands, if they have less, great. I'll plug you in where you need to be. And it's like, cool, this is going to be bass. This is going to be this other, maybe auxiliary channels, maybe percussion or whatever. So this way it's like channel 11 was percussion for this band, but it's going to be flute for this band, you know? So it's like, in a way, if you lay it out, it'll be an easy day.
Yeah.
Relatively, you know. But you have assigned places where you can plug inputs in without being stressed. But if you're just like don't have a system laid out or haven't thought about how to do it, it's going to be a lot of like, I have no idea where were my inputs before. Like, this is, you know, it
Yeah.
becomes a circus real quick.
When I guess when someone rolls a splitter into one of those situations, do most people just mirror through a CAD 5 cable or something like that? How do you avoid complicating if someone is laying out for 8 bands worth that day, and here you come with your fucking tails and all your questions?
um, well, usually with the tails, it'll be simple too because it's like, well, at this point, there's the thing people don't want to deal with. Okay, I have a bunch of drum channels plugged in that I need to unplug
Yeah.
for you to plug in your split. And at that point, it's like you prepare for that.
Yeah.
As well, if you had the time that day, right? And I usually just like if I don't have the time that day, and you're on stage and you're like, "Here's my split. This is what needs to happen." I'll just quickly go put tape. All right, I'll just put the channel number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So this way I can just replug it in. I usually try to prepare for that in advance and have some foresight, especially if I have the time. I'd be like, what am I doing right now? Great, I'll label some XLRs just in case someone's like, here's my XLR.
Yeah.
You know, or something like that. You
Look,
know?
there's been many times where I've made the I unplugged from a splitter and walked away. When someone's like, okay, I need to find on my drum line. Most of that's a pretty big issue to leave a guy with, you know?
Right.
In a live setting, when you're doing snare mics, do you always do a snare top or do you prefer snare bottom?
I think if I have the inputs, I do both. The snare bottom, just especially live, adds just a lot of snap that you don't get from that top mic.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and you'll see even in recordings. Sometimes it's like, oh man, I decided not to do a bottom mic, and I feel like I really need it. So I definitely am an advocate for a snare bottom.
Yeah, I'm realizing that much more with just sitting in front of a drum mix and trying to figure out what makes it sound natural. It's like, it's all about hearing those things, you know, even like just the little bit of looseness, like that's the drag that you can get on the snare, and that's all the reaction you want from this thing, you know, the pounds
Right.
on top, but like, what am I really going to do with that?
Yeah.
I was listening to a guy named Bill Hume, I think,
Okay.
and he was just talking about how he always has one extra overhead that he's gonna like a New York style compression. He's just gonna send this through, but he's pretty much gating it for just the snare to be in that kind of category.
Gotcha.
Just dirty, overdriven, and that's given me so much joy in my life just to realize how much of that snap you can get from up top. You know.
Right. Yeah, so I do recordings at the monastery in Walnut Hills, and we usually do so 2 just regular left right overheads, but we'll do an overhead mono or overhead center which is usually a Coles 4038, which is a really cool ribbon mic. And yeah, that thing, like, once you have your drum mix and you have that down, you just blend it in a little bit. And you're like, oh shit, there's some really cool presence that come into that. And if you want to be creative and send that through a compressor and just slam it, then you can get a really cool vibe. Again, it's like it depends on the context of the music, but sometimes it could be really cool.
Yeah, ribbon mics is something I'm still like I've never really used one myself, but just the idea of it, just like the literal push that this microphone catches is a very sexy, appealing thing.
Yeah, yeah, it's super cool. And what a lot of people don't know is that, or don't, I guess, don't think about. And then I work for an engineer named Mike Cisneros, and he's just like a mad scientist, if you will, like crazy hair, and like he'll be like, man, this dude from Nashville like builds these caps, and these, I got these resistors from this place, and like there's this guy in Germany who does this, and like he's just a mad scientist when it comes to audio stuff, and he loves that stuff. But he always told me, like, dude, the ribbon is literally hanging in there. He's like, so if you're storing your microphone this way over the course of 5 years or so, that ribbon's gonna sag. And so when it's hanging this way, it's a little loose in there, and it's not gonna, eventually it's gonna not sound right, and you need to get it repaired. So
I heard someone say that the other day, and they had like this gorgeous mic display where everything sat up right and everything was on. Like, I saw a video the other day. The guy who made Patreon, who plays in Scary Pockets, that keyboard player, he had like some video, like some content creators send their setup. And these people were like, just have an attachable clip for every single mic, so you're never remounting a microphone again. You just snap in, snap out. And then they had this super satisfying wall of clip-ons. I'm like,
right,
that is the way to do it. But if you're ruining mics that way, like, how tragic, bro.
right.
Last question for you. If you were going to tell someone, like, here's your one-stop fix for your single-channel interface and a microphone, what would you tell somebody to get?
Single channel.
For like tracking your vocals, your guitar, whatever you're going to do. If you're going to mono a drum set.
Man, honestly, Universal Audio makes such cool stuff. I would say go with the UA. Microphone-wise, dude, I have no idea.
Have you seen like I don't think UA makes it, but it's called the Sphere. And you can get a UA plug-in that helps you remodel like the cardioid feature of it. And
well, that's kind of been the trend right now. Well, I guess the past couple of years, where even like Steven Slate has a mic where the thing itself is a basic microphone, but virtually you can go in and choose what that microphone sounds like. Is it a U67? Is it a Neumann U87? Is it a SM57? Whatever the fuck you want.
Yeah.
So that's become a trend, and I know some people that like it. I'm a person who's just like, not for me, Yeah, it's hard, man. I would say, yeah, I don't know.
Dude,
I don't want to say one mic. There's so many that are cool.
Yeah. Well, like my first like fix everything mic was like the little Neumann TLM 102.
Oh yeah.
And like that was a great mic for me for a really long time. And one of the things I found out I hated about it is I didn't go all the way and get the shock mount. And I was putting this thing. It's like no wonder everything has this weird low end. It's like because you're hearing the sound of your stand, stupid.
Right.
So I'm always amazed when people are like, "Yeah, I started off with the cheapest AKG I could get or the cheapest Neumann I can get, and it got me through these couple records." Like I watched T-Pain talk about the setup he used for. God, what's T-Pain's first big hit? I think "Buy You a Drink" is what he was talking about.
Right.
And he shows this awful setup. It's like that's inspiring, man. Because most of the play is not the mic; it's the color you add after. But trusting it to have color for you is a very hard experience to get over. You know what I mean? Like the gear doesn't make you; your utilization of the gear is what makes you.
And you makes you. It's like I tell people all the time, dude. I'm like, you can record something beautifully. If the song sucks, the song's gonna suck. Yeah.
That's a painful truth.
It's true, dude. But I would say, one mic that's versatile is the 414. And if you don't want to get the 414 because it's too expensive, they make a 214 that's just cardioid. And dude, my brother recorded so many vocals with that thing, and I've recorded guitars, and it's like, it works. It's like if you want to capture something and it's a condenser, it sounds nice.
I think just getting in front of it, we all fall on our face in the recording process. Your click bleed issues and your gain structuring issues, but like as someone that's made that leap very well, very thoughtfully, and now it is your primary art form is the sound itself. Like, it's such a beautiful thing, man.
Yeah. There's you got to start somewhere, right? So
Fuck
so
yeah.
it's like being in a dark room and expecting to know where everything is. It's like, well, nah, dude, you might have to do some walking and running into shit.
Yeah.
Maybe figure out how to turn on the light.
Man, that's a beautiful way to put it. Well, Kevin Frias,
Yeah.
thank you for coming
Dude,
on
thanks
for a
for
little
having me,
bit,
man. Appreciate
Players,
it.
check them out. Where can they follow you at?
Kevin Frias Music and
Get your shit together.
Instagram.
All right, players. Peace, everybody.